My God, this book. This book. This book. This book. This book. The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Turton is one of the best books of this year. This is a welcome armchair adventure for 2020 for people who've been stuck inside and need a whirlwind adventure to go on that also sympathises with their seclusion in a wonderfully inventive way because it's on a big ship. So I haven't yet read Stuart Turton's original book, his debut novel, The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Haven't read it yet. Absolutely going to now. I'm not a big crime, thriller, mystery fan. I've read some of the Sherlock Holmes stories because you should. I haven't read any Agatha Christie, even though I've watched a lot of her adaptations, and I have one of her books here ready to go, and I'm finally ready to dive in. I think the only other crime, mystery, suspense style novel I've ever read was The Honjin Murders by Seishi Okumizo that I reviewed last year. But now, because of this, it's all I want to read. But I also refuse to read anything that isn't modern because I want it to be historical. This is historical fiction. So, I love boats. I love pirates. I love ships. You can't see it, I have a big ship tattooed on my arm. It was one of the first tattoos I ever got. It's not very good anymore. But I have all sorts of pirate shit on me. I got a Jack Sparrow tattoo. That was my very first one. It's again awful. But I really like boats and pirates and stuff. Pirates of the Caribbean is my favourite movie. So this was a good start. This is about a boat and it's set in the early 17th century, 1622 I think. And it is a kind of a riff on the Sherlock Holmes situation where you have one strange genius detective and one sidekick. And just like with Holmes and Watson, Watson was kind of the narrator while Holmes was kind of the protagonist, and they kind of do that here. You have the genius detective Samuel Pepys, and in the blurb it says, Samuel Pepys, he's our detective, but he's in fetters. He's being loaded onto a ship. This ship called the Sardam is being returned to Amsterdam, part of the East India Company. And Samuel Pepys has done something terrible and he's in chains and he's loaded into the brig on this ship, and his sidekick apprentice type, Arendt is this big, enormous brute of a man. He's an ex-soldier and he's been Arendt's apprentice slash sidekick for about 5 years. And Arendt is our protagonist, just like Watson. But the difference here is that he literally is our protagonist. He is the main focus. Samuel Pepys is actually really an afterthought. He takes a back seat. He is in the brig and he gets pulled out at midnight to take a shit off the side of the boat and to stretch his legs a little bit. And so Arendt is our protagonist. But still, there's another twist early on because we have a second protagonist. And our second protagonist is Sarah. Sarah is the very unfortunate wife of Arendt's rich uncle, not actually his uncle, a man who was a member of his father's circle and grandfather's circle, and he calls him uncle, as people do call their neighbours uncle and shit. So you have Sarah and you have Arendt, both incredible detectives, and Sarah is a wonderfully lovable character, and so you have these two main protagonists, and the two of them have to solve a mystery. The novel begins with a leper, a man wrapped in leper bandages. He stands on a crate and he gives a kind of sermon where he explains to all the people climbing on board the ship that they're all going to die. I actually can't remember what he says, but basically they're doomed. The ship is doomed. And then you find out that this leper was a carpenter. They identify him and they say, I think that this was a carpenter. Maybe he worked on the ship. They start investigating who he might have been. And you find out that he had his tongue cut out. So how did he give the doom sermon? You find out he had a limp. So how did he climb up on the crate? So the mysteries start to build. And then the main mystery is that of Old Tom. Old Tom is some sort of a devil that is somehow linked to Arendt, is somehow linked to the higher-ups on board who are potential victims of this devil, the devil and the dark water. And this devil, Old Tom, is going to start wreaking havoc on the ship. And when the ship leaves, the sail unfurls, the main sail comes down, and it has the symbol of Old Tom. That symbol is also scarred onto Arendt's wrist, And so all of these characters are somehow inextricably linked together. And it's a big, thick book. It is about 550 pages. It's one hell of a tome. And a friend of mine, Taylor, who is one of the publishers of the indie press Honford Star, they publish a lot of East Asian, mostly Korean, underground literature. He said that something that always stuck in my head is that a novel can rarely justify its length if it's more than 200 pages. And I thought that that was a really compelling argument, because you do read a lot of books that are just too long and they can't justify their length. This book does. This book absolutely justifies every page, every moment, every character interaction. It's all solid, it all needs to be there, and it all serves the plot. It is paced tightly and smoothly. There are moments where the pace amps up a little bit, but for the most part, it is steady. It is a steady mystery that twists and untwists and winds and unwinds as it goes. And it's led by really wonderful characters. And it is very, very genre bending. It is a mystery, because you've got the mystery of, is this devil real? Who's behind it? What is it going to do? Who does it want? Why does it want them? All of these questions. But it's also very much a character drama. We're very much invested in Arendt and Sarah and the other supporting members of the cast. Fascinating people, heroes and villains, all of them likable and unlikable and fun to love and fun to hate in their own way. Even Samuel Pepys, who again takes a back seat. Whenever we do see him, he's a laugh. And he's compelling, even though he's barely in it. And you kind of wait for him to be a kind of deus ex machina at the end, and that actually does happen, but again, not really, because Stuart Turton plays on expectations, he plays on genre. This is a book that has so many moving parts, because it plays with multiple genres. You've got your historical fiction, it's kind of fantastical, it is very much a character drama, and it is a crime mystery novel. And to keep all of those genres intact and blended together so well, while also having a very, very complex plot that links the characters together in a way that they shouldn't be linked, but it still works. And to have some loose connections to historical events, and things like the East India Company, and the Sardam was a real ship, a real Dutch vessel, trading vessel, and little things like that. It's nice, but it's not necessary to know, but it's still there. And Stuart Turton has so many moving parts within this novel that he has to keep track of, and they are all twisting and turning. You've got a cog that moves with another cog, and then it shifts around on the back of another cog to move over here. It's a clock. It's an enormous clock of a novel, and at no point do you feel overwhelmed. At no point do you think, this is too much to keep track of, I don't know who this person is. There's probably about, say, 12 main characters in this novel, all with Dutch names that are tough to pronounce, and it doesn't matter. It's all so well executed, slowly and carefully, with really, really compelling dialogue. It is funny, it is witty, it is snappy. There's a lot of modern humor that still works within the historical context, which I really appreciate. Stuart Turton is really, really good at descriptive language in a kind of fun way. There's a character very, very early on, I think it's the kind of main villain / victim, Sarah's husband, I'm sure it's him, where it's described as, were he to walk past a field of flowers, you would expect them to wilt. Something like that. It's beautifully done. And there's a lot of fun lines like that where it describes a character through inventive similes and metaphors that just help add a little bit of wit and humour and fun to the proceedings within the book. And it is a drama, but it's always having fun. It is comedy, it is tragedy. It is everything. Honestly, this is like a perfect example of how to write an absolute 100% complete novel, because it blends a handful of genres together. It is very much character-led, but it's also very much led by its plot. It manages to pull on a lot of different threads and have those threads all lead somewhere and all be meaningful. It is a complete novel. It is a book that has a broad scope, and all of it works. It is not precise and filtered into a single cohesive narrative, but it also is. It manages to do that, despite the fact that that's not really how it's set up, because it has so many moving parts and it blends so many different genres. And the plot is fantastically compelling and motivating, and it's set on a ship, and I love ships, and I love pirates, and I love sailors, and I love everything involved with this kind of gritty brutishness of the pirates, which is also played into really well because Sarah is a fantastically well-written main female protagonist. She is wonderfully realised as a really excellent feminist figure. Stuart Turton has written from a perspective of feeling trapped within her historical place in society at that time, and a place that women are still trapped in today. He writes with a lot of wisdom and maturity from the perspective of a woman who is snuffed and strangled by her position and her husband and her family life. She has a daughter, Leah, I think her name's Leah, and she's an inventor. She's a genius inventor, young teenage girl, and her mother explains early on that you kind of have to keep that to yourself because it will never get you anywhere because you were born a woman. And it's really depressing, but it also goes somewhere. And Sarah does so much with what she has. She's not a Disney princess. She is a hero. She is a fully realized, compelling character who asks you to sympathize with, empathize with, pity a little bit her station, her position in life, her role within her family, within society, and then also breaks those chains and does something compelling with it. And at no point is it overblown. It works within the narrative. Stuart Turton, I believe, is an excellent feminist writer. It really shines through in the way that he writes this character and her dialogue and the events in the plot surrounding her and what she does with the plot and with the things she's given. It's fantastically feminist, and honestly, I don't read a lot of white British men because I get tired of having to read awkward sex scenes and terribly written female characters, and I was very upset when I read The Secret Commonwealth last year because one of my favourite authors growing up let me down writing a character that he created. Philip Pullman Lyra is what I'm talking about. And Stuart Turton went, here, I can do it, I can fucking do it, I know how to write a compelling, wonderful, rounded woman protagonist with a daughter and an awful husband that you love to hate. And a love interest, because right from the beginning you have this slow meeting of the minds and bodies of Sarah and Arendt right from the beginning, and it's really wonderful to see. I am a romantic. I'm a huge romantic, and I get sad if a huge genre fiction novel like this doesn't have a romantic subplot. I've talked so quickly, I forgot to breathe. So I need a romantic subplot. If it's going to be fantasy, sci-fi, whatever, some big piece of genre fiction, I need a good romantic subplot. One of the best I ever read was in the Tales of the Ketty J novels by Chris Wooding. Holy shit, the romantic subplot in that is perfect, makes me cry, makes me laugh, it's wonderful. And this is similar. This is a fantastically well-written romantic subplot between our two main protagonists who are both equally compelling. These are the most lovable and hateable, fantastic, wonderful people I've ever read in genre fiction. This is an ultimate, wonderful book. This is going in my top 10 list of novels I fucking love it. The Devil and the Dark Water is an absolute masterpiece of cohesive plotting and narrative, wonderfully well-rounded characters who drive the plot forward, but are also carried along with it helplessly in the waves and waters of this choppy, dangerous world. And it plays with genre, and it plays with plot, and it plays with your expectations of what a detective's job is and what their powers are. It does everything perfectly. This is a perfect novel. Read it. Read it. One last thing. If you're going to read this book, and if you play video games as well as read books, I urge you, while you're reading it, if say it takes you a week, it took me a week to read this book. I also put it down halfway to read The Midnight Library, which was a big mistake. Don't do that. But if you are reading it over the course of a few days, also play Return of the Obra Dinn. It's an indie game. If you play games and read books, do those two things together. Return of the Obra Dinn is an amazing game to play while you're reading this, because you basically embody the same role that Arendt has in this book. So I really recommend that game paired with this book, and you will be lost in a world of murder mystery set on a sea full of supernatural things and eerie, wonderful boatiness. So play Obra Dinn and read this book. Right now.